Sir Bob is having his lunch. We've been talking about the underrepresentation of Africa here at this meeting. When we're talking about how what gets decided here should be the best interest of developing countries, how can that happen when they're not even here?
It's the usual official representation of the continent. You've got Trevor Manuel from South Africa, things to come in the continent. Meles from Nepad, and you've got Gaddafi from the AU, which kind of powers up with the EU. But the issue isn't here. The issue is permanently being representative in the institutional financial bodies. That's permanent representation, full hearing the voices of the peripheral marginalised peoples and countries all the time. That's the only way that this can be dealt with.
You've taken the African message and you've brought it here to the UK. You've been a very, very strong advocate. What kind of things would you like to see the British government doing more of that they aren't doing at the moment?
I think the problem goes, I think we have to look at this problem from a historic perspective. Africa has always been marginalised, right from colonialism, from slavery to colonialism to the present. And the issue is that at the moment, now we're stigmatised as needy, dependent and in need of aid. And for me, the irony is that in fact it's the West that is actually dependent on Africa for our resources, right from, as I said, from slavery, and that what we need to do is turn that around and stop looking at Africa as being dependent and actually realize that the relationship is not even equitable because of the dependency of the West on Africa's resources, which is growing, including, for example, even now cash crops, which are again then harming the local African farmers. But there's that constant stigma and way of looking at Africa as dependent when we're not dependent. It's the other way around.
Sir Bob, I'd like to get your input on the African Development Bank calling what we're seeing in Africa as a full-blown development crisis. The need for $50 billion this year alone to maintain pre-crisis growth levels. We're talking about reaffirmation of G8 commitments. Ban Ki-moon this morning talking about that. How can Western countries and G20 countries reaffirm their commitments and increase them at a time when they're having their own problems?
Well, very easily. If we forget words like aid and debt cancellation and call them under the new rubric of fiscal stimuli and toxic assets. Fiscal stimuli is aid, massive quadrillions of aid to ourselves. And if you consider that one company in the UK, Lloyds Bank, put £75 billion, and what the National Institute of Research for Economic Science last week, sorry I'm still eating, called for a 50 billion fiscal stimulus for Africa. In the old days, that is 3 months ago, that would have been called aid. The money is there. It can come from existing aid flows, it can come from IMF gold sales, it can come from arcane things like special drawing rights, cap and trade, climate emissions. It can come, it's there. We know it's particularly there because we're spending billions on self-aid, if you like. But what's very important is that you understand that this retreat to protectionism will harm us all. If you, in fact, move forward to expansionism and treat this 50 billion as an investment, you immediately get a return from Africa. Germany makes $2 billion this year. Britain makes $750 million this year. China and the US make $1.8 billion this year. So always aid has been an investment. And if you can put it in the context of here, you pass someone on the street, they're lying there, they need somewhere to live, and you give them 0.4% of a pound, which is what Britain's aid commitment is. That's what? A third of a 1p. And you give it to them, everybody would. And not only that, you get the productive return that this person gets a job as a result of this and injects their intellectual and productive capacity back into the economy. Would you do it? Yes. So the point about what is happening here is that the system we built was asymmetric. It failed because we did not include 50% of the world that lived on less than $2 a day. It didn't include, as I say, their productive and intellectual capacities. So our system became top-heavy. Instability is inherent in asymmetry. It falls over, and ours fell over. Today we begin, at least we try to begin, to build a new global financial architecture. If we do not bring in the voices and the representatives of those marginalized countries, it will fall over again.
Based on your discussions here and what you've just said now, how optimistic are you that leaders will actually reach a solution not only to their own financial problems, but to exactly what you're talking about? I mean, will we walk away from today with anything concrete?
I've been at most of the G8 the last X many years. Without question, this is the most important summit of my lifetime. Whether they make something of it now is a moot point. I'm not sure that they truly understand how grave a crisis this is. I'm not sure they truly understand it's a consequence of globalization, but the true consequence of a global economy, which isn't a global economy because it doesn't include 50% of the globe, but the true consequence of it is enforced cooperation. The national budgets of the UK or France or Germany or US or China are meaningless without cooperation with the rest of the world. So going forward, this race to the bottom of mutually agreed national interest is over. I'm not sure they quite understand that with their positioning. The news is made up here of Obama and Brown saying one thing and Merkel and Sarkozy saying another. Who cares? You know, Europe is just a single hotspot in the world economy now. What does China, what are they saying? What's India saying? What's Russia saying? That is, if not more so, just as important. And just as important is the cumulative clout of the people we've been ignoring for so long.
I'm pleased you mentioned China. It's received a lot of criticism for its involvement in Africa. How do you feel about that? Do you have any thoughts about China's so-called questionable investments in Africa?
You know, of course I have a view. In general, I'm positive. When the Chinese say we have no political interest, that's a political statement. When the Chinese say that Watson, we will make non-concessionary loans to Africa, we'll just give them loans, that's creating a new debt crisis. They have to behave responsibly, and they should behave cooperatively. That's the essence of what we're talking about today. But they should invest, like everybody else. Let's talk to this guy. You haven't asked him anything.
Sorry, yes, I haven't asked you what you're talking about. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what you take away from here today and what people in Africa are really keen to find out about the summit.
Again, just to echo what Sabah and Sakari said, when you're speaking on behalf of 50% of the world and you're not even here, that's a flaw in the system. And as they both said, the system needs to be changed. It's fundamentally flawed. It has been fundamentally flawed. Everyone has admitted that. So now if we're just trying to rebuild the same system again, it doesn't make any sense. If the system was fundamentally flawed, we need to rethink this whole thing again.
And generally, are you guys optimistic about what's happening today? I mean, how are you sensing things so far?
We can see a lot of energy. We just hope that that energy is moving in the right direction. And that, as they said, that there's a unified voice at the end of this. Everyone goes back their own little rabbit holes, and it's not going to make any sense at all.
Are you sensing any positivity?
Well, not really. I mean, not in terms of change. I mean, there's a lot of figures flying around. At the end of the day, it's not changing the whole development strategy, which is what Gaudi's just mentioned, which is what I feel as well that needs to be changed. And that's not happening.
Do you think that we'll ever actually see, like I said, do you think we'll actually ever see concrete change, or is this just going to be another talk shop?
No, I mean, you have to talk. That's the means of communication. I think you'll see action on regulatory reform of the banks, and that means tax havens will be scrutinised, and that means that creeps like Abacha will be held to account. Where's the $5 billion that he stole from the people of Nigeria? Where is it? It sluiced through the laundrette of the City of London and ended up in some alpine hidey hole. Get it back. So what we can do with those disgraced bankers who feel shamefaced enough and suitably penitent, maybe they could form a little group, I'm serious about this, using their undoubted skills and knowledge to track down some of this money as the tax havens become more and more transparent. What we ask of African nations, democracy, accountability, transparency, which is critical in my view, should be applied to our systems. And, you know, those thugs and those corrupt people who siphoned the money out of Africa should be held to account, and that's one way of doing it. That'll come out of today. It would be good if it's enforced. Other things will be the beginning of a newer realisation that these things cannot be resolved by 8 guys sitting around a table in Sardinia next July. That game's over, and well past its time.
If I can just jump in there.
I've got to go.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Gildo?
The change will come. It's inevitable. It's going to come. Whether or not they make that decision here, it's going to come. The situation out there is critical. People are dying. Jobs are being lost. Food has doubled in the course of a year. The change will come. We have to manage this process. We have to manage it responsibly, or else the change will come in a way that will be hard and have grave consequences for all of us. It's actually quite scary.
That Saudi, thank you so much, and Sukari, thank you both so much for joining us on CNBC Africa.